Good morning, everybody, and red friends. I make the assumption, and economists are good at making assumption, that I'm speaking to the choir, so I'm not going to argue the case of red and why it's important to include it. Rather, the key question is, how can we realize red? And just to be clear that I use red as a kind of an umbrella term, a broad term, for all the policies and actions that are needed to achieve reduced emissions and also increased removals in terms of forest restoration. How can we realize red? Well, first at the international level, as the discussions are going on here in Copenhagen, I think the key question are two things. First, how can we mobilize the sufficient funding that is needed? How to get the willingness to pay that has been expressed in words? How can we make that into a system, build an institutional framework at the global level and finding mechanism, whether it be global fund, whether it be market-based or combinations, hybrid mechanisms, how can we do that? It's to a large extent a political question that I, as a poor scientist, does not have a lot to do because it's in the secret rooms where the action will be over the next week. The second question is how to create an effective and efficient and equitable mechanism, the 3 E's that we have been talking about. Effective in terms of achieving the climate goals that we have to achieve emission reductions, efficient in terms of achieving this at the lowest possible cost, and also equitable in terms of distributing the benefits, but also the cost and the burdens of reducing red. Red will have costs, and we may have heard too often that it's cheap, and therefore we can achieve it without any cost. I think that's a wrong assumption. Everybody here and in the COP meeting, 99% at least, thinks that climate change is real and are very concerned about it. So there is a collective action game going on, a collective action game where we all try to get our acts together and work to limit global warming. But I think to understand it is also a money game. And Elinor Ostrom was here, and I reminded her the first time I met her at a workshop at Cifor, Indonesia, where one of her students gave a presentation about environmental policy, and he said this: the key thing to understand environmental policy is to realize that it has nothing to do with the environment. And we can't say something of the same. To understand climate negotiation, we have to understand that and realize that it has a lot more to do about than just the climate. So it's also a money game. And here's my 30 seconds political economy analysis. Forgive me for being brief and very superficial, but I'm only got 5 minutes. Rich countries, why are they interested in red? Well, of course, as I said, the climate is one thing, but wanting cheap offsets. Tropical forest countries wanting large transfers of money. NGOs support their activities. Consultants, opportunities in projects, and even to the extent that we're getting these carbon cowboys. I like to think as researchers, of course, the only neutral part of this, but I have to realize that we also have our interests in this, in the money. It is possible to make a deal that make most parties quite satisfied. I think it's a good thing, with the only losers being our grandchildren and the global environment. This is a complex commodity, if you may call it that, the reduced emission reductions, the VERs or the CERs that is being traded. I think, and I don't have time to go into this, but the CDM mechanism is one that has got a lot of popularity, of like $7 billion per year being traded, but no one is asking the inconvenient question, does it yield additional emission reductions? It's created as a pure offset mechanism, but no one is asking this inconvenient question. If 1 ton is kind of bought from a hydropower station in China, are we sure that is 1 kilowatt hour less built in coal-fired plantation? If it's not, we have created a mechanism that apparently everybody is happy with, but which increase global emissions. And we might get something. I'm taking a little bit of cynical view, but I think we also should be honest with this about the mechanism and ask the question, are we creating a mechanism that is truly effective and reducing, or are is this money cost game taking the dominant role. At the national level, and realizing RED, and the introduction here, we heard about the book that Cifor has put out about realizing RED at the national level. The core idea of the whole RED project is to make a performance-based system for emission reductions and removals of carbon from the atmosphere and storage in forests. We don't have the institutions. Very few countries are ready to do that. We have to look broader. And we have to have two agendas and two thoughts in our head at the same time. First, we need these broader transformational reforms that address the tenure question, the decentralization, the carbon rights, the governance, the corruption issues. But we don't have time to wait for that, and it would be naive to think that RED can solve all this. So we have to look at other policies that do not depend, kind of no regrets, low risk policies. And the good news is that we have tried a lot of this before, so we have a lot of experience which we try to bring out in the book. The bad news is that most of these experiences are type of lessons of what not to do. Let me look at two sectors that I think are important. First, in the agriculture sector, 3/4 of deforestation, according to the latest IPCC report, is caused by agriculture expansion. We can do something. Intensifying agriculture, which has the potential, if done correctly, and targeted particularly to non-forest areas, to reduce the demand for new agricultural land. Protected areas, which is about a fifth of the rainforests that are under indigenous territories, national parks, and other types of protected areas, which 5 years ago I was quite skeptical about, because you go into these protected areas and you see that they are not being protected as you want. And there's also the case of passive protection. They're located in remote areas, and therefore the effect, to the extent they are protected, might be by natural causes and not by the fact that they are protected areas. Do they work? I think there is a lot of studies now suggesting that even if you control for this natural protection, they do work. They do work, not 100%, but they do protect the forest maybe much more than we thought they do, as a recent World Bank report conclude. In Norwegian or Danish or Swedish, RED has two meanings. The one meaning of that is save. So on a good day, I think that RED can be the tallest landmark in the modern forest conservation history, and that it has the potential to really save the forests. RED, the other meaning is scared. So on a bad day, I'm getting scared about the big money, the potential for corruption and misuse. And of course, as an economist, I'm trained to be cynical. But to try to merge these two, I just want to end with a quote by the philosopher Bernard Shaw, who said that a cynic is a well-informed A cynic is a well-informed optimist. And that, I think, should be our approach, being optimist, but at the same time dare to be cynical and asking the uncomfortable question. Thank you.